Julie, there was a town hall here tonight. People are concerned about local law 97, what it's going to mean for co-op owners and condo owners. The legislation was passed before you were in office. So what's your own thoughts on everything to do with local law 97?
Yeah, my legislative director and I have been here, and we've been engaged in this issue since our first day in office. It's really important to me as someone who's a renter that hopes to be a homeowner to support our co-ops, because co-ops are really a pathway to home ownership. It's for people who can't quite afford $1 million home, it's like we do in Sunnyside, but they might be able to own a co-op for a few $100,000 so that they can start their family the way that I am in mine. I want to one day be a co-op owner, but at this rate it might be impossible because the shareholders are now going to have to afford even more for all of these fines as well as the conversion rate. It is disappointing to me that the conversion costs were not accounted for, and even though there were promises from the prior council for carve-outs for co-op owners, or the way that there are carve-outs for NYCHA or carve-outs for homeowners, that there was actual no carve-out for co-op owners. So what I've been doing, as you saw a few months ago, I've been making sure that, one, we're looking at legislation. We're going to be introducing a legislation that focuses on phase-ins for these fines and fees that aren't so punitive, because it should be based on their income, their yearly income by their tax returns, instead of making it a flat fee. Because someone who, like a senior who was here, who was very, very upset, talking about how this is going to be so costly for them that can't afford it because they're living on fixed income, should not be charged the same fines as someone who may be young and able-bodied, who may be making more than 6 figures a year comfortably with a dual income. So we want to make sure that we're looking at ways to legislate solutions for this, instead of just kicking the can down the line, being like, 7 years from now when I'm out of office, it'll be somebody else's problem. But we want to look at legislative solutions. But in addition to that, what I've been doing since first day in office is working with co-op owners and boards like Jane to make sure that we're setting up meetings for Department of Buildings, to make sure that any building that qualifies for accelerators as well as subsidies, that they're applying for them very quickly. And I've also been setting up meetings like we just had at Big Six Towers with Nydia Velasquez, Grace Meng, Senator Gianaris, Assemblymember Raga, and myself, so that we have state and city and federal all together in one room saying, this is the estimated cost. How are we going to divide these costs in a way that makes sense from every single level of government to make sure that each fiscal year we're helping them meet this goal of conversion for a greener apartment?
Has that legislation been submitted to council? Where does it stand? And
so it's going to be introduced. We're going to submit the idea. It's going to go through a process. So it takes time, but it's better late than never. I wish that this was a carve-out built into the original law, but unfortunately this was before I was in council, and it did not.
So could this get passed before LL 97 kicks in January?
It is probably unlikely. I would never give people false hope, but this is why I'm doing both, not only introducing legislation, but also making sure that we are financially helping them by having these meetings on every single level of government, so that every single building like Celtic Park, Sunnyside Towers, Berkeley Towers, that we're saying, hey, let's meet together, give me your inspections estimate so that we understand how much the conversion rate is, because we already have an estimate for what their fines may be. So that way we understand of how much funding for each co-op building we need to aim for and how we're going to raise that.
Okay, it seems co-op owners and condo owners say they're being unfairly targeted. Like there's, as you mentioned earlier, carve-outs for single house dwellings, things like that, if the facilities are under 25,000 square feet. So it still seems that, this is the first time I heard about this legislation, so forgive me, that the condo owners will still have to pay something, and single family dwellings and other buildings will still kind of essentially get off the hook. Is that...
This was a bill that passed before my time, so I can't speak to why someone got a carve-out and someone didn't. But what I can do, again, is financially support them by getting them more subsidies and funding from the state, federal, and city government, and also making sure that when we do phase-ins, that even if there is this fine and fees, that it is done fairly. So it's not that I agree with everything of Local Law 97, but what I can do post-passing are these things, because the law has already passed. What we saw tonight with more than 200 people that were here ideally we would have this level of engagement prior to the law passing so that you could make sure that if you're not preventing the law from passing completely, like you can make the law fail, is at least you're negotiating for yourself to make sure that these carve-outs are built in to protect yourself. But somehow it went under the radar, and now we're seeing the backlash of it after.
What was mentioned tonight also was there's legislation to postpone LL 97 coming for 7 years. Is that something that you'd support?
No, because 7 years is not just a number. 7 years is actually how many years we have term limited till I am out of office. So what that does is kicking the can down the road, so that way you're saying it's not my problem, it's going to be my successor's problem. And you would never want that, because 7 years from now, people are still going to be living in their co-ops, and this problem is not going to go away. It doesn't actually solve the problem to kick the can down the road. So we need to look for real legislative fixes now, instead of just passing the buck to the next council class to be like, well, it's your problem now. Because these people, like, I don't know if people expect them to be deceased in 7 years or what you expect, but 7 years may seem like a long time away, but it'll come in the blink of an eye, and we're not going to be any more prepared, because I've also seen and witnessed how the government works. If the government gets delayed, they're not going to be spending all 7 years being like, okay, every 365 days per year, I'm going to be preparing to make sure that my constituents are protected, and Department of Buildings is going to do more to save up money in reserves so that they can pay for this. No. They will forget about it, and then it will be 7 years from now, and then they'll wake up again, and it'll be a new administration, as well as a new council class of people who are going to walk in blind and be like, oh, what did I just get hit with? It's not responsible.
But it still seems either way that the condo owners and co-op owners are they're getting hit harder than other people with the exemptions, and there are a lot of worried people here. Do you think that they're being unfairly targeted, or what?
I don't think their worries are unfair at all. I think their anxieties are true. And if you look at the exemptions and those who are being charged with the onus of being responsible for all of climate change, it's not fair. And we have to help them to make sure, yes, the intention of the laws are good, and we want to make sure that our environment is healthy, and we want to make sure that we're sustainable and that we're resilient as a city going forward, especially with the level of flooding we have, the heat waves that we're living in. But we have to do it responsibly, saying we can't just put up arbitrary numbers and dates, being like, by 2025 we're going to be zero emission, like carbon emissions. No, that's not how it's going to happen. We have to think about everything. Like the fact that we don't even have an estimate for my whole district of how much this conversion is going to cost, that is unacceptable. I am collecting that now with my co-op owners so that I have the amount that I need to help them convert. This should have been done prior to the law passing, not post. It's irresponsible.
So shouldn't we just hold off until everything is sorted? Like, shouldn't we not delay instead of bringing something in, still bringing in phases in January?
There's no point of saying should we not. The law has already passed. Okay. It is fact. It is already passed. That means that the ship has sailed, and we are either getting on the ship or we're going to sink. Okay. So it's time for us to accept our fate, that this law has passed, and therefore what I can do as a legislator is do everything in my power to help these people meet this law, and do everything I can to legislate around this law to help those people as well.
Read our special Local Law 97 Climate series by grabbing a free copy of AM New York Metro, or visit amny.com.